Well, good afternoon, church. This is Pastor Chad on a Monday afternoon. I hope and pray that this day finds you well rested after the weekend and ready to serve the Lord with all your strength this week. Just wanted to bring just a quick instructional video, I guess. Yesterday, Sunday morning, preaching through the Gospel according to John, and we came to the end of chapter 3, which brings the focus back to John the Baptist and his final testimony that we really get from him regarding his ministry and his position in the kingdom. Because if you remember, John was sent as the precursor in the spirit and ministry power of Elijah to prepare the way of the Lord, right? Which is the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we see that unfolding in the Gospel of John, the first few chapters. Chapter 3, we find his final exhortation, I guess, regarding who he is and his purpose to exalt Christ. And within that, there was a little bit of a controversy amongst his own disciples because they are, as they are baptizing people who are coming out into the wilderness to be baptized, to receive water purification. We find that Jesus and his disciples are also there, and Jesus's disciples are baptizing more people than John's disciples are, and John's disciples are like, what gives? You know, it's kind of like we were doing this first, you know, now all of a sudden this group of people are getting more attention than we are, and their ministry is being more fruitful than ours. And so they come to John the Baptist and they say, you know what's going on here? And John really gives a great answer, and we looked at this yesterday, and I kind of dissected this into really 5 answers. But the one that really sticks out to me, and the one that this video will draw attention to, is verse 30, where John the Baptist says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." And in sharing this during the sermon, I mentioned that the Greek, seeing this phrase, this sentence in the Greek is just really beautiful. And so I didn't take the time during the sermon to do that yesterday, but in the comments during the live chat that goes on during our live stream sermons, several commented that they would like to see that. As a matter of fact, I got an email from somebody saying they would really like to see that. So anyway, so just briefly, I'd just like to show that to you this afternoon. Take it or leave it. If it helps you, great. If it, if it's all Greek to you and it just doesn't make any sense, then, by all means, just stick to the English and move on with life. But anyway, so here it is. Switch over here to my iPad. Verse 330 in the New American Standard translation here says, "He must increase, but I must decrease," right? And then down below we see it here in the Greek, which reads, "Ekanon de auxanen, eme de elatusthai," right? So if we translate it, that one, or he, it is necessary to increase, right? And then we have our break here in the clause, between the two clauses. Eme is I, but to decrease. So Greek word order is not really all that important compared to like English. English word order is very important. Greek, verbs, nouns, adjectives can all kind of come in whatever order they feel like coming in. So we have here, but I, to decrease. Okay, and we have de here, it is necessary, is influencing both verbs. Okay, so with that, what we want to draw attention to is these two verbs, auxanen, elatusthai, okay, which is to increase, to decrease. Okay, and what I drew attention to yesterday in the sermon was this whole sense of increasing and decreasing in the sense of being active or passive. So there is a sense doctrinally where for God to increase in our lives, we must actively pursue a decreasing of ourselves, right? Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and he will exalt you at the proper time, James says. Paul says, I beat my body daily and bring it into subjection to the authority of God, right? I mean, there's just this active sense by which we subdue ourselves, we decrease ourselves, okay? But there's another way that we can see this too, in the sense that in the revelation of the presence of the magnificence and authority and power of God, creation has no option but to decrease. And in this sense, it's done in a passive way, right? So God shows up on the scene, and what is the result of that? There is a decreasing of everything else. As he is magnified, everything else, all of creation is decreased. And it's done in a passive way, right? Creation isn't actively decreasing itself, but it is just in a passive. It's just an obvious result of what happens when God shows up on the scene. And that's what this phrase is teaching. Not necessarily the other way, where we actively pursue a decreasing of ourselves, but rather it's just kind of it's just the only obvious answer, that when Jesus shows up on the scene here, that John has to decrease. John's disciples have to decrease. Everything has to decrease in the presence of the Lord. Okay, so my argument is validified in this Greek passage here, in these Greek verbs. Okay, so let me show you. Let's talk about voice for a moment. Okay, so in grammar, we have the concept of voice. Voice is seen in active, in the sense that the subject is doing the action, right? On the other hand, we have the passive voice, whereas the subject is receiving the action. Okay? So the difference here being, how is the verb interacting with the subject? In the active, the subject is doing the action, right? The subject is influencing the action to happen, right? Passive, the subject is receiving the action, right? So the subject is being performed upon, right? It's being influenced by the action. Okay, let me give you an example here in English that will help to clarify this. If we were to say, Billy hit the ball. Okay? Or we could say this: Billy was hit by the ball. Okay? Our verb here, Billy hit the ball. Hit is the verb. And our second example, was hit, is our verb here, okay? So in this sense, in the first one here, Billy is doing the action, right? He is hitting the ball. So this would be an example of active voice, right? Billy is doing the action. On the other hand, in our second example here, Billy was hit by the ball. We find that Billy is receiving the action. So this would be an example of passive voice, okay? So that's the difference there. Now, if we bring this back into our John 3:30, we find here that auxanein is in the active voice. So what does that mean? That means that our subject, ekainon, is performing or doing the action. So in this sense, ekainon is representing Jesus. So Jesus is increasing, right? And so it's active. He is actively doing the action. On the other hand, we have elatusthai, which is passive. So what does that mean? That means that the subject is receiving the action, which is eme, which is I, which is John the Baptist. John is speaking here, right? So in this sense, we find that he must increase is an active transaction, but I must decrease is a passive transaction. And so, therefore, this is why I said yesterday that this is showing that when Jesus appears as he promised, as all the prophecies promised that he would, the only response that John can do, and honestly all of creation, is to decrease. And this not necessarily in an active sense, but in a passive sense. So anyway, I hope maybe that clarifies, and hopefully maybe that inspires you to go learn Greek. Have a great afternoon, and God bless you all.